Hey y'all, I want to share something vulnerable that happened in my life this week as a means of illustrating how to do parts work and inner child work. The other reason I want to share this is because in this day and age of social media, there's this, what I believe to be a misconception amongst the community of influencers who are healers and coaches that by our sharing our vulnerabilities and our wounds, that's going to somehow negatively impact our business, which leads to healers and coaches and influencers only sharing their highlight reel, which leads people to believe that once you do a certain amount of work on yourself, then you're no longer going to have these intense reactions. And that's just not true. Just because I'm a coach doesn't mean that I don't get triggered. And I'm committed to debunking the illusion that there is such a thing as living a life that is devoid of unwanted internal experiences. So my sister was throwing a little birthday gathering for me, and we were out in the backyard playing a team game of Frisbee, and I kept throwing it in completely the wrong direction and throwing it over the fence. And I was on my boyfriend's team, and he jokingly made a comment saying, like, okay, babe, how about I take it from here? And there was a part of me, a little girl part of me, that feels incompetent and feels like she does things wrong and that people are going to abandon her because she's not good enough at things. And his little comment triggered this inner child part of me so much that I had to leave the game, walk inside, and I promptly burst into tears. And then he came inside to come check on me, and I felt so shut down that I said I didn't want to talk to him and rejected his attempt to support me. And then I felt so frustrated at myself and ashamed of how strongly I reacted to such a little comment that I started criticizing myself and telling myself that if I get this triggered, then I'm a fraud and I can't be teaching people how to respond to triggers if I'm over here getting hella triggered. And the more I told myself that my reaction was inappropriate and that I shouldn't be feeling how I was feeling, the more shame I felt. And then the more I criticized myself for feeling that shame. And I was thoroughly stuck in a shame spiral. Has this ever happened to you? And then the same thing happened the very next day where I lost a game of mini golf and I got so frustrated at myself and I felt like a failure and I wanted to shut down and push everyone away. So I started getting really curious about what is this part of me that is reacting in this way, and then this other part of me that is shaming myself so much for reacting in this way. And because it is often very hard for us to coach ourselves because these dynamics exist in our blind spots, I brought it up to my coach today and I had a big breakthrough around this and I want to share it with you. So I told my coach, I don't want to be so reactive. I don't want to be so emotional. I don't want to be such a sore loser. I don't want to push people away when I'm not getting my way. And I'm so frustrated at myself that that's how I've been reacting. And she had me realize that this little girl part of me that reacts in this way comes from the fact that there was so much pressure put on her as a little girl to perform and to excel. And she was made to believe that if she didn't perform and be perfect and get things right and achieve, then she would be rejected and abandoned and unsafe. And there wasn't enough space for her to process the emotions that she felt about that, all of the pressure from all different angles that she felt being put on her. And here I am judging this little girl and putting even more pressure on her to react differently and telling her that not only did she fail at the Frisbee and the mini golf, but she failed at responding in the appropriate way. So I'm adding insult to injury to this part of myself. And I'm telling this little girl part of me, how dare you react so strongly to something so small? But I'm not realizing that to this little girl part of me, it's not small at all. It's huge because to her, it's not just not being good at throwing frisbee or playing mini golf. To her, it actually means being abandoned, being unloved, which means being unsafe. And in the moments that I was shaming myself for reacting in the way that I reacted, I was doing to the little girl that lives within me the same thing that was done to her, where she was told that her emotions were invalid and that for having emotions, she was weak. And she felt that she needed to hide her emotions. So I internalized the voices of the authority figures from my past that told me that my emotions were invalid. And I was doing that same thing to myself, to this part of myself. This part of me believes that if I don't win and succeed, then I'll be abandoned. And in my attempt to not be abandoned by others, I ended up abandoning this part of myself, believing that if others saw this overreactive, oversensitive part of myself, that they would abandon me. So I rejected and suppressed and abandoned this part of myself. And this is actually really common when protector parts inadvertently end up creating exactly the type of pain that they were originally trying to avoid. The more that we believe we have to suppress certain parts of ourselves to avoid pain, the more pain those parts of ourselves feel, and then the more we feel the need to suppress them, and the more pain they feel, so on and so forth, and we end up abandoning, rejecting, neglecting, abusing these parts of ourselves and deepening their original wound. And so when I realized that I was doing this and I checked in with this part of myself, I was very surprised to find that she was furious with me. She was really angry at me for shaming her and abandoning her. She was like, Don't you remember how stressful it was? How scary it was? Don't you remember what it was like? How dare you shame me for my reaction? How dare you not be there for me? I realized that I've been telling this little girl that she has to stay silent and stay hidden, or else people aren't going to love me anymore. And I've been bullying and shaming her. And I felt such remorse for this. And I told her, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to abandon you again. And this part of me said, I don't believe you. Why would I believe that? You still think that if I fully express myself, that's not acceptable and that I wouldn't be lovable. So why would I believe that you're not going to abandon me again? And I said to her, you are absolutely right. And you have every right to be angry with me. And you're allowed to be angry with me for as long as you need to be. And I get why you don't trust that I'm going to stay here with you and keep loving you, because I haven't done that in the past. And I want you to know that I will stay here as long as it takes. I will sit here loving you no matter how much intensity you feel, no matter how angry or fussy or hurt or stubborn you are. And I will not take away my love for you. So this part of me, this little 5 or 6-year-old part of me, totally called me out on my She was like, I see how conditional your love is for me. And I can smell from a mile away that you're only telling me that you're going to love me to try to get me to be a certain way. You're like, okay, I'll love you if that means that you'll shut up and stay hidden. And that's not going to fly anymore. This little part of me was like, I'm done being silenced and suppressed. I'm done being compartmentalized. You either love me unconditionally or don't pretend to love me at all. And she reminded me of how important it is to not go into healing work with an agenda. Because when we have the intention of healing so that that part of ourself goes away, we're only further deepening the wound that that part carries. The wound of feeling unloved, the wound of feeling unimportant, the wound of feeling invalidated, the wound of feeling like it's not okay exactly as it is. We have to be willing to sit with that part of ourselves for an eternity. And when we're willing to be fully with that part of ourselves forever, that's when that part feels safe enough to heal and reintegrate. And you can't fake that. You can't fake that willingness. The part will know. And what I realized is that what I perceived to be a weakness, that I overreacted, was actually my strength. It's this part of myself that is standing for me actually loving all parts of myself unconditionally. So now, rather than wanting those triggers to go away and never wanting to react in that way again, I'm excited about the next time that I have that trigger and that response come up, because that's my opportunity to connect again with this part of myself and show her, prove to her that I love her, that I love her sensitivity. I love how expressive she is with her emotions. I love her deep, deep desire to belong. And I will have the opportunity to talk to the protective part of myself that believes that if I don't repress this exiled little girl part of myself, that I'll be abandoned. And I can tell that protective part of myself that to repress this little girl part of myself would be to abandon myself, which is the worst form of abandonment. And I'm not willing to do that. And we don't need to repress this little girl part of myself, because I'm willing to be with her. I'm willing to feel what she feels with her. I'm willing to love her. And then that protective part no longer needs to carry the burden of needing to repress this other part of me. Isn't parts work so cool? If you're interested in learning exactly how to do this healing work on yourself and with yourself, surrounded by a supportive community of people who are also committed to this healing work,